Tonight on Crossfire, one of the country's most explosive flashpoints.
The real war today is actually a war on motherhood.
With no room for compromise.
We cannot allow the opponents of life to continually weaken the moral fabric of our country.
Is the country changing? On the left, Kohn. On the right, Newt Gingrich. In the Crossfire, Ilyse Hogue, the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, and Lila Rose, the president of Live Action. What's changing in the national debate and with voters' attitudes? Tonight on Crossfire.
Welcome to Crossfire. I'm Kohn on the left.
I'm Newt Gingrich on the right. In the Crossfire tonight, guests with very different views on the value of life. Today in Washington, we saw thousands of people in a -4 wind chill standing to protest babies being killed. In their view, it's a moral issue that is literally life and death. We've been having these marches since the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade 41 years ago. But here's what's different. New technologies now enable us to see the unborn baby is a baby, not just a lot of tissue. And we now understand that unborn babies feel pain. Faced with this technology, killing babies becomes harder and harder to defend, which is why 64% of Americans now oppose any abortion in the second trimester, and 80% oppose third trimester abortions, and that's why the debate is changing.
But you know, here's the other issue you're missing in that introduction, Newt, which is this isn't about personal views on abortion. I respect your views. The difference is my views don't infringe on your views, whereas your position literally restricts my choices and my rights. In the Crossfire tonight, Ilyse Hogue, the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, and Lila Rose, president of Live Action, an anti-abortion group. Lila, just last year, 22 states enacted stricter abortion laws, and we're seeing, because of those laws in places like Texas, more and more women are choosing to self-abort. They're turning to self-abort as a resort because there is no more access to safe and legal abortion in the state, or limited. Don't you feel that your positions, your extreme positions, are just forcing women toward these more dangerous options?
I think that, Sally, we should dare to have a better view for America and our women by saying we shouldn't believe and have to think that women need abortion and that we have to kill our children to achieve the dreams and the careers and the families that we want. I think we can do better than that as a society. I think women deserve better. I think we should fight at the community level for programs that are positive, that help women if they're single mothers. We should improve the foster care system. We should improve the adoption system so that we can welcome children into this country instead of seeing them as a threat and killing them by the thousands each day.
That's all valid. Can you answer that question specifically, which is, for the women who still do choose abortion, restricting their option just leads them to more dangerous choices? Before Roe versus Wade, 50% of
why are they in that position, Sally? Why are they in the position to feel like abortion's their only option? Could it be because a boss didn't want to promote them? Because a boyfriend was going to leave them? A university professor said, we're not going to be flexible with our class schedule? Let's look at the reasons and let's address those reasons, but let's not turn to killing, dismembering, poisoning. Let's not turn to killing our littlest Americans as a solution to these problems.
Ilyse, let me ask you, if you read the rationale of Roe versus Wade, it was based on a particular moment in time about viability of the baby, and has a whole elaborate argument about that. The fact is, with new technologies and with new scientific breakthroughs, something like 80 to 90% of all babies survive after 26 weeks. Shouldn't we look seriously at how, if Roe versus Wade were being decided today, it would set a much later date and say that clearly this is no longer a question about abortion anytime, anywhere, but it would say, there is a cutoff because after that date, the baby clearly is viable and as a baby.
Well, absolutely, the vast majority of women who choose not to carry a pregnancy to term do so very, very early in their pregnancy. And in fact, the very small minority that get later, very complicated situations, tests that come out terribly, either for the prospects of the life of the mother or the child, that cannot be tested earlier. Very, very complicated decisions, which is why when Americans hear how complicated those situations are, that they are among the most complicated medically.
So let me
they
ask you this,
believe that the choice should remain between a woman and her doctor, and not with politicians who are not the experts.
So let me ask you this. Would you then accept that after the first 26 weeks, a medical panel, say of 3 doctors, would say, yes, this is a medically necessary case? Because candidly, what happened when we first looked at this was, if it's only one doctor and the doctor is an abortion doctor, the doctor always found a medical excuse.
What we already have is a situation where Roe says up until the point of viability, this is a choice that the woman can make. Beyond the point of viability, this is a choice that requires medical expert to determine what the potential risks and outcomes are. And doctors actually impose restrictions all the time. We have case after case of doctors saying that this does not meet their own personal test. And that's exactly what the role of the doctor is.
I think an important question would be, I mean, and I would ask this of NARAL, is why is it that every single abortion regulation, limitation, restriction, anything, even the ones that most Americans agree with, for example, a ban on sex-selective abortion, why would you lobby against that? Why would you be opposed to that?
Most abortions are medical decisions that the majority of Americans vastly agree should be left between a woman and her doctor. The kinds of restrictions that have been imposed on the other side are manufactured restrictions to limit and narrow and narrow and narrow women's choices till they're forced into desperate situations, exactly like what Sally's talking about. And in fact, where you and I agree, Lila, which is awesome, is that we should actually push for the kinds of opportunities and economic equality that allow women the broadest range of choices. And what we see is that politicians who vote to restrict abortion all the time disproportionately vote against, in fact, the ACA, which provided prenatal and maternal care for women, and equal pay, and the kinds of things you're talking about that I agree with women need to make informed choices.
I want to pick up on where you're going, Lila, and where you went, Newt, because there's a way in which folks who are opposed to abortion try to portray a sort of focus on later-term abortions to kind of paint this extreme picture of what Ilyse said are vast majority, over 99% abortions earlier in the pregnancy. But let's talk about extremism for a second. Lila, I heard that you said that women who are raped should be forced to carry their pregnancies to term. I think we have a clip we're going to roll.
They're going to say, wow, that was a redemptive part of this suffering. That was something that helped to redeem it. But abortion adds more violence to that violent act of rape.
Are you really telling women that they should be forced by the government to carry their rapists' babies?
This is the way that I would answer that, Sally. When a woman is raped, that's a horrible injustice against her. The rapist should be held to the fullest extent of the law, liable for that, culpable for that. The woman needs healing and the support of her community. But an abortion doesn't unrape a woman. An abortion just adds more violence on top of that first violence that she endured. And you look at the stories of someone like Rebecca Kiesling, a woman who was conceived in rape, and she says, should I have received the death penalty for the crimes of my father? I mean, if your father did something bad in his life, should you receive the crime? Should you receive the penalty for his crime? That's not fair. I mean, I think all of this comes down to this question. What is the life in the womb? What is the life in the womb? Is it a human life? Is it a life? Science and reason teaches us it's a life.
You are saying specifically...
So we should recognize the human rights of this whole group of people that we've denied rights for, and so we're dismembering them, we're poisoning them, we're ripping them apart. You mentioned, Sally, late-term abortion. I want to address that real quick. Late-term abortion is horrific, but all abortion is horrific. Even in the first trimester, keep in mind, heart's beating at 3.5 weeks.
We're not going to get into that right now. I want to go back and
why not?
That you're saying you are saying in effect that the rapist should have more rights than the woman to decide what happens to that.
The rapist isn't allowed to kill that child either. The rapist isn't allowed to kill anybody.
Isn't it
no one's allowed to kill anybody?
That we live in a country where Lila Rose could decide that she would choose to carry her rapist pregnancy to term, but her version of morality doesn't actually dictate what I can choose to do in that moment. And that's what religious liberty is about. It's about you getting to choose what would be right for you in that circumstance, but I don't get to tell you what to do, and you don't get to tell me.
But Ilyse, I agree with you until the point where your rights end where another person's rights begin. And there is another life in the womb. When you conceive, you now have a person inside of you. This is a beautiful thing, but this is the question.
That is what you believe. That is not what the majority of Americans
teaches us this. When you conceive,
the good news
individual, unique, distinct human being that just needs time and nourishment to grow.
70% of Americans.
All right, it's getting interesting. I want to add something to this conversation. If conservatives are really concerned about reducing abortions, I have 3 common sense policies they should support but won't. I'll tell you what they are next.